the negative internal monologue that most of us have in our head, we need to turn that into an ally. We need to turn that monologue into our biggest cheerleader. And so we need to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because going down that rabbit hole of beating ourselves up, nothing gets done at all. Everything grinds to a halt. And so if we can stay out of that rabbit hole and stay kind and loving and forgiving, and we will be, and the world will be better for it.
Welcome back to the Bombshell Business Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Hurdle, and today's episode is going to be full of wisdom and experiences and tidbits to help you along your journey. And it's a journey that I have most certainly been on in the past couple of years that y'all have walked alongside me. So I'm really excited to share our guest today. Let me tell you about who you're about to have as another person to think of in your life and have those words in the back of your mind when you need that encouragement, which is half of what the show is all about. Jennifer Standish is the author of Permission Granted, Live Your Life Full of Joy and Peace, a book that offers readers practical advice on how to create an amazing life regardless of their past experiences. She is also the founder and president of Give Yourself Permission, which helps women create new rules for their lives so they can overcome limiting attitudes that prevent them from achieving career success and finding happiness. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have this conversation on so many levels. I guess I want to maybe get in the Wayback Machine a little bit, because I know that we all have our stories and how we have arrived at the season of life that we're in now. And now you're really talking about some important things from a place of power and authority. But I have a feeling that maybe that's not been the case along the whole journey. So can you take us back to like why you wrote this book and what the backstory is?
So it's fascinating. It's also very funny. So I wrote this book. Well, originally it was a money grab. I said, you know what? Nobody's talking about permission. And I just want to do something like Chicken Soup for the Soul, where I can do like, give yourself permission, women, give yourself permission, teenagers, give yourself permission, love, give yourself permission, career, right? And just had these little tiny books that were all like, 4 inches by 4 inches, and you could set them on the counter and you could buy sets, and they would be super easy. There would be no journalistic integrity to it. It would just be like this cute little thing. And so I went to a whole bunch of publishers, and everybody loved the idea. And I settled on one publisher, and I wrote the first 20 permissions, and they were gut-wrenching. And I sent them to the editor, and I was like, all right, this is not what we talked about. But I thought I would just send them to you anyway, because these come from my past, having been raised by a narcissist. And, it's interesting, but I'll get on the right ones, the ones we discussed. But I just thought I'd share them. And she goes, oh, Jen, this is the book you need to write.
Isn't that funny?
And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's a departure from what I thought,
You're like, I was going to be all lighthearted and fluffy and like, you want the hard truth. Okay.
Yeah. She goes, no, I think we could do the other stuff. We could do the fluffy, like.
We'll get to that.
Because I was like, I'm into the merch. Let's do the merchandise. Like, let's do the mugs, the t-shirts. Like, I really, like, it truly was just like this pure marketing, fluffy stuff. And it really was. It was the permissions, the first 20 were the hardest permissions that as I was recovering and trying to like put my life back together again after having a nervous breakdown in my 20s.
Oh my God.
Of, the result of, what happens when you're raised by a narcissist. And I emerged from college a shell of a human being where I had no idea who I was, what I wanted, what I was good at. I had no moral code. I had nothing. I was just like this shell. And so how does somebody like this operate in the world? Well, you don't. You end up crumbling. And that's what I did. And so I had to start putting myself back together again. And in many regards, these were the rules. These were the rules that this was the foundation upon which I had to then start building my life. And so, it really kind of took 20 years, much like, birth to 20, I mean, it takes a long time to build your foundation.
Well, you had to reparent yourself essentially, right? I mean, like
you have to parent yourself. You have to work. You got to provide for yourself. You got to go, I mean, it's very much like when you are a child and you go into Baskin Robbins, your parent probably, if they're wise, gives you 6 flavors. Like,
yeah.
they don't give you 31. They give you 6. And then as you get older, you get to just, you end up going through all 31. But as an adult, you walk in and you go, oh no, I get 31. You got to taste every single one. And every single flavor has a potential to be a mistake. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So lots of mistakes, lots of going down roads and backing up, lots of like, oh, I think this is me. And then it's not me. And then this is me. No, it's not me. And so as you're doing this in your 20s and 30s, or I was doing this in my 20s and 30s. So there were lots of mistakes, lots of dead ends, lots of and it's hard because as everybody else is building their lives, I'm still trying to figure things out. So I really do feel as if I'm 10 to 20 years behind everyone.
But if I could just interject real quick there, as somebody, I mean, I've been coaching people for 10 and a half years and like really before that in my career and whatnot as a leader, but like as an actual certified coach for 10 and a half years. So you can imagine the volume that I've dealt with and how many different, backgrounds have come to my attention. What you're describing is not rare. Like to have 20 years that you're now trying to undo and you're trying to undo it quickly. And like, you have to go back and process those things so that you can then decide, well, what do I want for myself now? I don't have to have the permissions of people from the past and those voices of the past and the experiences of the past. Like when people wake up like you did and see like, today's the day that I can start doing things differently. That is more common than like it doesn't even take being raised by a narcissist or having a traumatic childhood I mean, obviously yours is like at a whole new level. So you come at this with like a lot more urgency, maybe of like, let's get it together.
Yeah. Well, there was just so much more, but no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm a coach and I work with people who have, some of my clients have severe imposter syndrome and they have anxiety through the roof and they've gone through multiple bouts of cancer because of this anxiety. And they're in their mid-50s. I know. And they're just finally giving themselves permission to, I love that phrase, give yourself permission, to relax and they realize they're looking back. And so, yeah, it really isn't, and that's one of the things that I had to realize was it's really not uncommon. And so what?
I love you.
Oh, what? And one of the things that I used to years ago, it used to get me angry. It was like, oh, what could I have accomplished if I had a loving, supportive family? And then one of my friends said, you don't really know. You might not have accomplished anything.
Mm-hmm.
So now I really look at it all as I've come so far to say it's really a gift.
It is.
Because I could help people, I've struggled with suicidal depression, narcissistic parental abuse, imposter syndrome, anxiety, panic attacks, workplace, career sort of stuff. Like my bucket is so full of things that I've had to heal that I can now help other people. So I really look at it as, well, now it's just a gift.
Yeah,
I agree.
And some recent experiences that I've had in my life, as I was moving through it, I was aware of how much more compassion I could then show up with other women who have experienced something similar. And it was like instantly people were coming to me for a very specific thing because they saw how I was moving through a season and they wanted to move through that season in that same way. And so it's like, okay, this really sucks right now. But, just like the mythological creature Chiron is the wounded healer, and there's a reason why I call my house Chiron's Cove.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I live in LA and we have a huge homeless problem.
Yeah.
And I bet that there are a tremendous amount of healers within that community. And if we, and I just, maybe that's, you just solve it one person at a time. And maybe the people who are really struggling are really the healers that need to heal themselves so that they can turn around and help that next homeless person get off and then help that next person.
And you can feel it when you're in their presence too. That's what's crazy. Well, if you're awake enough, I guess. But so I would love to get your definition, because the word narcissism gets thrown around after bad dates and like getting ghosted on a dating app, and it's all over Instagram and everybody's a narcissist. And you and I know that like narcissistic personality disorder is a very specific mental health issue that is not for everyone, although it is something that I think since reality TV and social media, the propensity of it has increased, or at least the awareness of it. But like not everybody's a narcissist. So not everybody that rubs you the wrong way is a narcissist. Let me say that. Can you describe what that means? Like the fact that you were actually raised by a narcissist who did clinical damage?
Yes. So it's somebody who lacks empathy. And I believe narcissists are created where sociopaths are born. Mm-hmm. They look very similar, whereas sociopaths are incredibly confident and they come from a position of strength. Narcissists are incredibly insecure and they need people to prop up and constantly reinforce that insecurity. They're incredibly damaged people and they use and exploit and manipulate other people to feel good. Mm. And when it's a parent, they're manipulating and exploiting their children to make themselves feel better about their wound. And I don't believe that children of narcissists go through the traditional child development phases because our emotional needs weren't met, because we weren't cared for. They didn't care about addressing, what our needs as children were. So we were very much left alone to fend for ourselves. And so the anxiety that, children felt, the hypervigilance, it was just bananas. And she was not violent, but she was scary, really scary. And my father was the enabler, and he was very much a child, and he was terrified of her as well. And so the whole house revolved around what would keep mom happy and calm. And so when I emerged a college graduate, that's all I knew was how to keep one person happy. And so I was incredibly codependent. Mm-hmm. And I was a great employee because all I did was keep my boss happy, And so, the damage is just profound. I tell people that, narcissists, they hijack their children's childhoods and then sabotage their adult lives because we're not raised to succeed. And I look at my siblings who didn't end up escaping, and they've kind of struggled their whole lives and they're still kind of, attached. And so, and that serves her, and that serves my mother in many ways.
And of course, you're the black sheep, bad person. You're the one of course. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I have no connection to my biological family. Yeah. I just can't.
Yeah. Well, as you need to protect yourself in your adulthood. So,
yeah.
And those are hard choices sometimes that you have to make. And I'm not advocating that you get upset at a family member and then you just cut them off. But when there is abuse and there's an abuse cycle and there's no end to the abuse, ending abusive relationships really, truly is the only option for your mental health. Only option. And I'm not a psychologist. So that's Amber's opinion based on what I have learned from psychologists. So I'll say that, look it up yourself. But you said a word, it's a word that stings in my soul, and that's codependency. So that is rampant with women. Like, let me fix it all at my own risk, at my own health, at my own satisfaction. I will be over here having a panic attack in the corner as long as you all have everything that you need and you're all set up.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Well, I mean, in a parental narcissistic abuse is that you've got to keep this one person happy.
Or else.
And yes, or else. And your happiness doesn't matter because she could be very volatile. And that, that's the rule in the house. And this is all that matters. And, but it does set you up for a lifetime of suffering because your needs are never met, but you never even get to figure out what your needs are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
then you get thrown into motherhood and spousal situations and
perhaps,
leadership roles and volunteering. And then now you don't just have your narcissistic mother or whatever your situation was from the past that put you onto the codependent journey, but you're doing that in volume.
Well, what happened to me was I was one person with a boyfriend. I was another person with my friends. I was another person at work. And the boyfriend kind of went away. And then the friend situations kind of changed. And then I progressed in my career to the degree where I was no longer just parroting what my bosses wanted. It was now I was kind of expected to have opinions. Because I was senior enough to, was, well, now Jennifer needs to think on her own. And I had no original thoughts.
No.
I was just like, well, this is what my boss would say. And so it was like, well, that's not enough anymore. And I had none. And I panicked and I had a nervous breakdown.
Clearly, I can imagine what the alternative would be.
And so I had a nervous breakdown and I ended up selling sodas and juice at a strip club on Sunset Boulevard.
Well,
that's all, there's
your next step.
Yeah. That was my next career move. And I made a ton of money and I put myself in therapy. And I walked into my therapist's office and I said, I'm blonde and I like pizza. And that's all I know about myself. And I was 24 and he said, all right, we'll begin there.
Yeah.
But that's really truly it. It was like, I knew my hair color and that I liked pizza. And that's it. That's all I knew. And
so I think at this point, Jennifer, that's where you didn't need permission. That's where you went and did something you went left instead of right. And you stepped into your own power, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. So we've talked a lot about the problem, which I just feel like so many listeners, maybe they didn't have a narcissistic, abusive, parent or whatever, but we all have that stuff in our background that brought us to where we are today, excuse me, of why we look to others for our worth, why we look to others for, well, what do I do next? Or, well, what do you want and need? Because I don't even know what I want and need. I mean, you knew you're blonde and like pizza and full stop, that's a problem. Also, not all that uncommon when I'm sure you've had this experience in coaching too, Jennifer, where it's well, who do you want to become? I've never thought that through before, or that's the first time I've ever given consideration to that. I don't think I could tell you on the spot. That is consistently something that I hear and I'm like, wow. And so then I quit asking that question because I needed to ask other questions before we could even get there. So you wrote this book and it's permission granted. So let's start talking about the solutions to move from whatever that background is for us to where you are now, which is a life full of joy and peace. It's life I'm enjoying living right now too, Jennifer.
Good for you.
Harmony is my word of 2023. And I'll tell you what, you either move me towards it and you get to stay, or you move me away from it. And hey, no bad thoughts, no bad energy. You live your nice life way over there.
Right. God bless. God bless.
God bless you. The back of your head looks lovely, just so you know. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So where do we even begin? Where do we even begin to give, is it permission from you? Are we giving permissions to ourselves?
Giving permission to yourself to live authentically. And the book is filled with permissions that I had to give myself in order to be happy. And my hope is that readers will identify with a lot of them and will probably not identify with all of them. But, give yourself permission to have an alternative job that's outside of corporate America. You'll be better for it because, there's a lot of ways to make money. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5. You can be self-employed. You can work at a strip club selling sodas and juice. That was a great experience for me because it taught me there's a lot of different ways to make money. It doesn't have to be corporate America. And that freed me up. So now I've been weaving in and out of corporate America my entire life. And I've had, I'm better for it. It can be as simple as, I don't want to wear a traditional female bathing suit. I want to wear, when I go to the beach, I want to wear a tank top and I want to wear swim trunks because that's what I feel comfortable in.
Good for you.
And I want to enjoy the beach and be in the water that way. That's authentic to me, right? It can be no more diets. No more diets.
God, yes.
Right. That's dieting is truly a feminist issue, right? And we will, so no more diets. I don't need to be, I don't need to be thin.
Yeah.
It's not permission not to be thin. And food is not the enemy.
Nor is your body.
Right. And also give yourself, for me, it was give yourself permission to love, I love my family's soul, but I don't love who they are physically, their physical manifestation in this life. So I had to make the decision to sever relationships with them. But I know that when we all pass, we'll meet up again and we will be fine. So that's how I make peace with it, is that I love their souls because their souls are beautiful and pure, but who they are in this lifetime is I can't have. So it's just all sorts of little
choosing
things.
To be too. I think that's fair because you can accept somebody and understand where their wounding comes from, and you can have empathy for that person and oodles of compassion. But that doesn't mean that you need to allow for them to have influence on your experience of this life. And you don't have to listen to their negativity or their abusive language or their physical abuse. You can love from afar. I love that you brought that up because it's not I hate them, I can't deal with them. It can be I love you and I understand where this is coming from. And it hurts me to even understand the level of hurt that has brought you to this place. And you have the choice to go get help. You have the choice to go find healing. And you're not choosing that. So I'm going to choose me and my mental health. That's it. Yeah. It's just really that easy.
Yeah. So, that's my hope with the book, is that people will just, read it and have epiphanies and be like, oh, yes. But also understand that it's really, you're giving permission to yourself and to align with what makes you happy. And look at, and I do workshops and I have a workbook, a companion piece to the book.
Ooh, so good.
Yeah. Where it's literally what are all of the rules, the foundational rules that you were taught as a child about money, about career, about family, about children, about marriage, about sex, about all of these things. What were you taught and what doesn't work for you? What doesn't serve you? And let's rewrite them. What's the new rule? Because
your rule.
You get to choose. You don't have to live by your program. And many of the programming that you have is limiting your life and is keeping you small and is keeping you very safe and invisible. And so it's encouraging, I always encourage people to take a look at, what were you programmed? I call them foundational rules. They're the rules in which, you were taught as a child. They're the foundation. And what works for you and what doesn't. And some may work for you. God bless, keep them. But which ones don't?
Yeah.
And I learned these foundational rules actually when I was teaching people how to cold call, because I'm a cold calling expert and I was a sales consultant and I was working with people who had severe call reluctance. And
because they might be told no or
well, it was, I don't want to I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to be a pest. I don't want to, right? So there are all of these foundational rules that we're taught as children that really get in the way of making a cold call. And so I would tell people, I'd be like, I give you permission to call a business during business hours to discuss business. It's how business gets done. IBM was built on cold calls, right? It's how business gets done.
Yeah.
So I give you permission to do this. And it was like, well, I don't want to bother anybody. Well, okay, well, now we've got to talk about, are you really bothering? And do you have a value? Are you really offering something of value? But anyway, that's where those foundational rules come from, really.
Yeah.
Is how, and so what foundational rules do you have that are getting in your way?
And so here's my observation on that. I think there's so many reasons why. So Bombshell, if this is you, I'm not calling you out. I'm inviting you to think about why. Why don't you want to create your own rules? Because at this point, what's comfortable is that somebody else created this rule. I'm the martyr who's stuck with it. I can point the finger back there at this problem, and I don't have to take responsibility for it. But when we rewrite our own rules and we get that wrong, which, by the way, you can't get it wrong because you never get there, if I can quote Abraham Hicks, but like, you will find a way to recover, I promise. There is always another choice that you can make. And so if I rewrite the rules and then something doesn't go right, I can no longer point at somebody else. I have to point at me. And I find that that's a roadblock for women who have this need to always get it right because of the same stuff that they're coming from. So where were you in the journey, and what advice would you give to women like that who are scared to just own and take responsibility for the good and the bad in their life, where all fingers point back to them?
Yeah. Well, that's the 31 flavors is like, those flavors are going to be mistakes, is that's the learning.
Yeah.
That's the learning. And there are really no mistakes. It's just, okay, you learned that wasn't right.
Yeah.
You never would have known that if you hadn't tried. And so life is full of lessons and learning, and very few mistakes are so permanent that they change the trajectory of your life.
You had a nervous breakdown, and now you've written a book and you're on podcasts all the time, and you teach workshops, and people pay you for your advice. Like everything's recoverable, people.
Yeah, exactly. So don't beat yourself up about it and be like, oh, okay, well, I made that mistake.
Yeah.
You can always make more money. You can always, the one thing you don't get is time. Be aware of time, because you don't get that back. But you can always make more money. You can always, fix a relationship. You can always.
Most millionaires have lost their millions multiple times before they got their greatest amount of wealth, because to them, it's just kind of part of it. It's not like and there goes my whole life right there. It's like, I did it once, I could do it again. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's being tenacious. It's being relentless. It's not giving up.
Yeah.
That's what will determine your success, more than the fact that, I've never made a mistake. If you live a life where you never make a mistake, you're living a very small life.
A very small life. And then if you have something somewhere that we capture that says, if you don't work towards being a better version of yourself consistently, you'll never reach your full potential in life or business. And I just wanted to reach out and hug you on that, because like every single day is an opportunity to learn about yourself, learn about how you impact others, learn about how other people's perspectives could be helpful to you, learn how to do things differently, learn how to reparent yourself, there's so many different things that you can learn that will enhance who you are and what you're capable of. So where does that come from for you? Like, what have your observations been where you felt like that needs to be shared?
Because I think I'm self-taught. I have a basic business education. Everything I've learned through doing and making mistakes and figuring out my way. And so I think that every decision is a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And we should all take advantage of it. And learning never stops.
Yeah.
It never stops. And it doesn't have to take place in a certificate program or a degree program.
Mm-hmm.
It's living life and living a full life and being conscious and mindful is a great educator.
So good. When it comes to business, I often tell, like, especially those high achieving women who are afraid to get it wrong, which is a ton. And I've found especially women with mother wounds tend to be super high achievers, perfectionists, because that's what they aspired to in their becoming as a kid. And so that's just the pattern that they're in. And it's like, you know what? We could put life in this as well, but business is a petri dish. It's like it's just an experiment. So if we could just take all of the shackles that we put on ourselves about like how right we have to get everything and just think like a scientist. A scientist has a hypothesis, something that they're just trying to prove or disprove. They don't have an attachment to the outcome. It is an experiment. And so then they have this list of different things that they're going to try to either prove or disprove this hypothesis. And when one thing doesn't work, they don't go, well, I'm a failure and the world is coming to an end and I'm never going to be able to recover from this. They just go, oh, okay, that didn't work, which means now in this next experiment, we're not going to do this thing because we just proved that won't work. So we're going to take that off the table and now we're going to try it that way. And y'all, that's just what life is. It's all it is.
It really is. Don't attach a value to it. It's just like, oh, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah.
I
got that bad
then you pivot.
wrong.
Right. Oh my gosh, you pivot. You take your learnings and then you pivot, right? And I have pivoted so many times that I'm a ballerina. I just pivoted. I
feel like I need to fly out to LA and us go have tea or something somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we need like 38 more episodes, but most certainly before we get into how you can find our book, and I didn't even know about the workbook, shame on me, but that is, especially when you're doing the work like this, especially when you are like having to dig into your own story and your own thoughts and your own opinions that you're maybe not even accustomed to hearing from yourself. Having the workbook to go along with the book allows you to pause and really feel the information and write it out and think through it and sit with it and then put the book up for a day and like let it, like it's not all going to get done today, but I want to get to where we're going to find that. Obviously, I'm pretty excited about it. But before we get into all of that, I have to ask my question. I'm really interested on what you're going to say. Last question of every podcast episode is, what parting piece of advice would you give a bombshell, a bold, brave, unwaveringly confident woman in business, or someone who's on the journey of becoming a bombshell?
Be kind to yourself. Just be kind.
Yeah.
We're so awful to ourselves. Yeah. The negative internal monologue that most of us have in our head, we need to turn that into an ally. We need to turn that monologue into our biggest cheerleader. And so we need to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because going down that rabbit hole of beating ourselves up, nothing gets done at all. Everything grinds to a halt. And so if we can stay out of that rabbit hole and stay kind and loving and forgiving and just we will be and the world will be better for it.
So true. So good and so true, and something that we have to remind ourselves of daily because it's human nature. It really is. So
it's mindset, and the quality of your life is determined in large degree by your mindset, and we have full control over our thoughts. We don't realize that, but we have lots of choices, and we can choose to look at a situation a dozen different ways. And we could look at it negatively, and we are programmed in our survival mode, when we were being chased by dinosaurs and we were afraid to look at things negatively, but you can hijack that and say, no, I'm going to choose to look at this as a learning event, a learning experience, or I'm going to choose to look at this as something positive. Well, like, oh, great, I now don't have to get on that flight and go to that conference. I'm delighted.
Yeah.
I'm delighted that there's this traffic and I missed my flight because now I don't have to go away when we get ready. I mean, there's so take control of your.
I wonder what I'm going to experience because I didn't get to experience the thing that I thought I was going to. I wonder what's possible now.
Right. I wonder if this is the universe intervening and now that there's something else that's better.
Yeah. Oh, and there is. You and I both know there always is. Nothing
Yeah.
is a mistake. Nothing
Right.
is a mistake. So
Right.
even the mistakes.
Yeah.
So finding you, first of all, we need to find her on LinkedIn. All of these will be in the show notes. Everything I say will be in the show notes at amberhurdle.com/podcast with an S. Look for Jennifer Standish's episode. If you're listening to this well into the future and not the week or weeks that it was published, then, just go back into the archives. There's a quick little button that you can, or link that you can click to go and find this. And so definitely want to connect on LinkedIn because we do business on LinkedIn. We are business women. Then you can also go to jenniferstandish.com, and then you can find her book, of course, at link on your website, Amazon, all the normal places.
Yep. And really, it's just go to Amazon. It's on Amazon. Yeah. And if you want the workbook, you just contact me through LinkedIn and I can send it to you. And I use it a lot with clients. And so we can, work together, do a couple sessions and work through it.
Yeah. And what does that look like from a coaching perspective? Do they book like a discovery call with you on your website and then see
what I'm doing now is I offer intuitive clarity calls where, it's $95, it's an hour, and they're very healing. And it's very often, it's exactly what somebody needs, and that's all they need. But some people, want to continue to come back. And then we work out some sort of package. And you can find all of that information on my LinkedIn profile. But I don't like sticking people in packages immediately because they need to kind of know how to work with me. Mm-hmm. And really, sometimes, a lot of times it really is just one or two calls. That's all that's needed. And so they don't need 10. But I do work with clients, long term. And I am the kind of like their secret weapon at work, where I'm just like their business coach.
Yeah.
And, we can work, I have clients that we're working with for years and we just meet once a week and, it's a beautiful relationship.
I love that. It's like the amount of support that you need for this issue. And I'm not going to hard sell you on all the other stuff.
Yep. I'm really flexible.
Before we get married.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I am in all the work that I do. People come to me, they want some long engagement. And I'm like, let's start with this. And then you could decide if you even like working with me. And then we can commit to a more, because that's the last thing you need is to have a relationship with somebody that's longstanding that just doesn't feel energetically aligned. So yeah. I love that, Jennifer. You're so great. Well, before I wrap up and tell everybody all the things, thank you so much for your brave and bold, all the things that bombshells are, redirect on where your life could have gone. And thank you for shining so brightly for the rest of us to learn from.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really do.
For sure. And thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
So bombshell, you could see why I was pretty stoked about having Jennifer on the podcast today, because I have to imagine that probably hit a lot of you right between the eyes and maybe a little bit in the gut. And maybe Gertrude got on your shoulder and started telling you all the things. And we know what to tell Gertrude. She needs to just shut on up and we redirect our thoughts just like Jennifer taught us today. I'm very, very much aligned with Jennifer's feedback and her experiences and her recommendations. And so I can't encourage you enough to take a stab. Just what could go wrong if you buy this book and ask her for a workbook and connect with her on LinkedIn? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's your next step. It is your very next step. And that's all you need to know. Just your next step. The rest of life will unveil with each next step. So there's your next step for this. And then as it relates to, really connecting with other bombshells, if you know somebody who might find this powerful because they had an experience and they've overcome it, and that, send this to them. If somebody is really stuck right now, send this episode to them. Otherwise, we would love your rating and review. It just helps us reach more bombshells. It trips up that algorithm so that people can get the suggestion to listen to this or watch this episode. So we treasure that from you. I very much appreciate the limited amount of time that you're spending, your limited time that you're choosing to spend with me and my guests each week that we produce this. And I just hope that this was as meaningful to you as it was to me. And I will see you on the next episode.